Evelyn Reed believed the world was composed of assets and liabilities, neatly arranged on a balance sheet. People, divisions, entire histories, they were all quantifiable. As chief executive officer of Sterling Automotive Group, she had built a formidable reputation by acquiring underperforming companies, stripping them for their profitable patents or real estate, and discarding the rest like husk. Her office, a glass-walled perch 40 stories above the city, was a testament to this philosophy. It was minimalist, cold, and offered a commanding view of the empire she managed with an iron will and a perpetually critical gaze. Below, parked in the exclusive executive spot, sat the crown jewel of her acquisitions, the Lamborghini Fenice. It was one of only 20 ever made, a hypercar born from a boutique Italian engineering firm Sterling had swallowed whole and then unceremoniously dissolved. The car was not just transportation, it was a statement, a trophy of a successful corporate raid. Its value, both monetary and symbolic, was immense. Today, she was focused on a minor but irritating liability on the Q3 report, a derelict research and development facility in an unfashionable part of the industrial district. It was the last remnant of Veloce Engineering, the very firm that had birthed the Fenice. According to the report from her subordinate, a sycophantic vice president named Gerald, the site was a drain, property taxes, security, insurance. It was filled with what he termed obsolete tooling and scrap metal. The recommendation was simple: level it and sell the land. Evelyn agreed. It was a clean, profitable solution. She tapped the dismissal on her tablet, the decision made in less time than it took for her assistant to bring her morning espresso. She despised loose ends, and Veloce Engineering was a thread she was eager to snip. Miles away, in a world of concrete floors and the smell of industrial lubricant, Elias Thorne moved with a quiet economy of motion. His world was not one of assets and liabilities, but of tolerances, pressures, and the intricate dance of mechanical parts. He was a maintenance technician for a third-party contractor, assigned to the various properties owned by Sterling Automotive Group. His current post was a sprawling, half-empty warehouse, another of Sterling's forgotten holdings. His job was to ensure the building's basic systems, plumbing, electrical, heating, did not fall into complete disrepair. It was solitary work, and that suited him. His flannel shirt was worn but clean, his work boots scuffed but sturdy. His tools, laid out on a clean rag beside a malfunctioning HVAC unit, were arranged with the precision of a surgeon's instruments. This quiet life was a deliberate choice. After his wife, Elena, had passed away, the world of high-stakes, high-pressure engineering had lost its allure. All that mattered was providing a stable, peaceful life for his daughter, Lily. Their small house was a haven of order and warmth, a stark contrast to the echoing emptiness of the warehouses he tended. In the evenings, he would help Lily with her homework, her small, serious face a mirror of his own concentration. She would often watch him in his garage as he worked on small projects, her innocent questions cutting to the heart of things. "Why does that piece have to be so shiny, Papa?" she would ask, pointing to a polished valve cover. And he would explain, patiently, that it was not about being shiny, but about being smooth, about reducing friction, about making something work as perfectly as it possibly could. It was a philosophy he applied to everything. He found a quiet satisfaction in fixing what was broken, in restoring order to a chaotic system. The pay was modest, the work unglamorous, but it gave him time and peace. It allowed him to be present for Lily, a promise he had made to Elena and to himself. Before the quiet life, before the flannel shirts and the maintenance contracts, Elias Thorne had been a name spoken with reverence in the most exclusive circles of automotive engineering. He had been the lead systems engineer at Veloce Engineering. He was not just an employee, he was the prodigy, the artist behind their legendary power plants. His mind operated on a level of mechanical intuition that others could only approximate with complex software. He could feel the resonant frequencies of an engine block in his fingertips and diagnose an imbalance by the timbre of its idle. His masterpiece, the culmination of a decade of relentless innovation, was the Veloce V12. It was not merely an engine, it was a mechanical symphony. He had personally overseen the design of every component, from the proprietary alloy of the pistons to the unique geometry of the combustion chambers. He held 7 key patents on its design, patents that Sterling Automotive Group now owned but did not fully comprehend. They saw them as lines of code, digital assets to be licensed or shelved. They had never understood that the engine's genius was not just in the schematics, but in the specific, almost alchemical processes Elias had developed to build it. When Sterling acquired Veloce, they saw a brand name, a few valuable patents, and a lot of overhead. They offered Elias a corporate position, a desk in a cubicle farm where he would be expected to synergize and interface. He saw the soulless future they offered and politely declined. He was a builder, not a bureaucrat. The real reason for his retreat, however, was far more profound. Elena's illness had been sudden and merciless. In the sterile quiet of the hospital, the roar of a dyno-tested engine, once his life's soundtrack, had seemed obscene. His ambition, the fire that drove him to work 18-hour days perfecting a camshaft profile, had been extinguished. It was replaced by a single, desperate focus, his daughter. After Elena was gone, he looked at 6-year-old Lily, her eyes holding a universe of confusion and grief, and knew he could not return to his old life. A career that demanded his soul was no longer a price he was willing to pay. He needed a job that ended at 5 o'clock, a job that did not follow him home, a job that allowed him to be there for scraped knees, bedtime stories, and the quiet, unspoken moments of healing. So, the legendary Elias Thorne vanished. He became just a man, a single father working a simple job. He packed away his awards, his design journals, and the framed photo of him with the first Veloce V12 prototype. He chose obscurity as a shield, a way to protect the only thing that now mattered. His only link to that past life was Marcus Vance. They had been roommates in college, Marcus studying law while Elias filled notebooks with engine diagrams. Marcus was now a partner at a prestigious law firm, his world as polished and corporate as Elias's was gritty and practical. Yet, their friendship endured, grounded in a shared history and mutual respect. They met for coffee once a month at a small, out-of-the-way diner. Marcus, in his tailored suit, never seemed out of place sitting across from Elias in his work clothes. He was the only one who knew the full story, the only one who understood the chasm between them and Elias was and the role he now played. "They're shutting down the old R&D facility," Elias said one Tuesday morning, stirring his coffee with methodical slowness. "The Veloce building. Demolition scheduled for next month." Marcus leaned forward, his expression sharp. "Your building? The one on Kenwood?" Elias nodded. "They're selling the land." Gerald Finch, one of their VPs, classified everything inside as scrap. A flicker of something, anger, maybe, or just a deep, weary sadness, crossed Elias's face. "Scrap," he repeated, the word tasting like ash. Marcus watched him, his legal mind already turning. "Elias, what's in there?" "Really? Not what's on their inventory sheet. What's actually in there?" Elias looked out the window, his gaze distant. "Memories. And potential." He paused, his thoughts gathering. "The original tooling. The jigs for the V12 block. And 3 of the early prototypes. The ones we used for stress testing. They aren't on any official manifest. We built them off-book." Marcus's eyes widened slightly. "How valuable are we talking?" "To someone who knows what they are, they're priceless," Elias said quietly. "To Sterling, they're a liability. An unknown variable. Easier to melt them down." Marcus took a slow sip of his coffee, his expression thoughtful. "An unknown variable," he mused. "Corporations hate those. But opportunities are often hidden inside them." He set his cup down. "Let me know if you need anything, Elias. Anything at all. You know I believe in your potential, even if you've tried to bury it." The day Evelyn Reed decided to personally inspect the Veloce facility was a whim, born of a rare gap in her schedule. She told her assistant, David Chen, that she wanted to see the liability for herself before it was wiped off the map. It was a power move, a way of reminding her team that nothing escaped her notice, no matter how trivial. She drove the Fenice, its thunderous V12 engine a stark contrast to the decaying industrial landscape. The car was a masterpiece of carbon fiber and raw power, its sharp, aggressive lines painted in a custom shade of pearlescent silver called Argento Veloce. As she pulled up to the gate, the on-duty maintenance worker was just finishing a repair on the electronic lock. It was Elias Thorne. David Chen, a young, observant man who followed Evelyn like a shadow, stepped out to open her door. Evelyn emerged, her presence immediately commanding the space. She wore a charcoal gray wool coat that cost more than the car Elias drove. Her eyes, cold and analytical, swept over the dilapidated building and then landed on Elias. He was standing near the front of her car, his work finished, waiting to be dismissed. But he was not looking at her. His attention was entirely on the Fenice. His head was tilted, and his gaze was one of intense, professional scrutiny, not of slack-jawed awe. He saw things no one else did, the almost imperceptible panel gap near the front wheel arch, the way the light caught a faint stress line in the paint, a sign of body flex under extreme torque. He slowly raised a hand, his calloused forefinger tracing the sharp crease of the fender, a line he himself had sketched a decade ago. He was not admiring the car, he was communing with it. To Evelyn Reed, this was an unforgivable transgression. She saw a lowly worker, a nobody in a dirty shirt, putting his hands on her multi-million-dollar asset. It was a violation of the unspoken caste system that governed her world. The surface, the appearance, was everything. And this man was marring the perfect surface of her authority. "Get your hand off my car," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. Elias's head snapped up, his concentration broken. He pulled his hand back as if the metal had suddenly become superheated. He looked from the car to her, his expression unreadable. He did not stammer an apology or cower. He simply stood there, silent. His silence was not defiant, it was the quiet of a man pulled from a deep and complex thought. But Evelyn interpreted it as insolence. "You are on sterling property, touching my personal property," she continued, stepping closer. "Who is your employer?" David Chen, holding a tablet, quickly interjected. "Madam CEO, he's with Facility Maintenance Services. His name is Elias Thorne." Evelyn did not look at David. Her eyes were locked on Elias. "Thorne," she repeated, the name meaning nothing to her. "You're fired. Have him escorted off the premises. And I want a call made to his employer. His contract with Sterling is terminated, effective immediately." She turned away before Elias could speak, the matter already concluded in her mind. She had asserted her dominance, punished the infraction, and restored the proper order of things. As he was led away by a bewildered security guard, Elias looked back one last time, not at Evelyn Reed, but at the Fenice. He saw the heart he had created, trapped in a beautiful but unloved cage. And in that moment, the quiet sadness he had felt for years began to harden into something else, resolve. The next day, a formal bid was submitted to Sterling's acquisitions department. It was from a newly formed LLC, represented by the law firm of Vance, Gardner, and Crowe. The bid was for the complete contents of the Kentwood R&D facility, designated Lot 74B, assorted scrap and tooling. The offer was for $10,000. Gerald Finch, the vice president who had recommended the demolition, saw the bid and laughed. He forwarded it to Evelyn's office with a note: "Some junk collector wants to pay us to haul away the Veloce trash. Recommend we accept." David Chen was the one who placed the email in front of Evelyn. He had been troubled by the incident the day before. The man's quiet dignity had stuck with him. He had run a cursory search on the name, Elias Thorne, but the public record showed nothing remarkable. Still, something felt wrong. Evelyn glanced at the bid, her mind already on a billion-dollar merger negotiation. $10,000 was less than a rounding error. It was an insult. But it was also a solution. It saved them the cost of hauling the material to a smelter. "Fine," she said, not even looking up from her other documents. "Sign it. Get it off my books." The contract was drafted by Marcus's firm and signed by Sterling's legal team within hours. It was a standard asset purchase agreement, but Marcus had included a specific clause, buried in the boilerplate: buyer assumes ownership of all contents within the designated facility, inventoried or otherwise, known or unknown. The Sterling lawyers, focused on speed and offloading a liability, signed it without a second thought. They were getting paid to have their trash taken out. It was a win. As Gerald Finch processed the final paperwork, he joked with his assistant about the poor fool who had just bought a pile of rust. The day the keys were handed over, Elias walked into the Veloce facility alone. The air was thick with the dust of forgotten years, but to him, it smelled like home. Sunlight streamed through grimy clerestory windows, illuminating floating motes of dust like tiny, suspended stars. He walked past empty desks and overturned chairs, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous main workshop. He headed for the far corner, to a section of the wall that looked like all the others. He ran his hand over the painted cinder blocks until he felt a faint seam. He pushed. A section of the wall, perfectly balanced on hidden hinges, swung inward, revealing a dark, climate-controlled chamber beyond. This was his secret sanctuary, a room that had never appeared on any blueprint. Inside, under heavy canvas tarps, were the treasures he had come for. He pulled the cover off the first shape. It was a Veloce V12 engine block, mounted on a stand. It was not a production model but one of the 5 original prototypes, cast from a superior, lighter alloy he had developed. It was a ghost, an artifact believed to have been destroyed. He moved to the next tarp. Underneath sat 2 more engines in varying states of assembly, along with crates of specialized components, titanium connecting rods, hand-ground camshafts, intake manifolds polished to a mirror finish. This was not scrap. This was the genesis of a legend. But the true prize lay at the very back of the room, in a heavy, fireproof safe. Elias spun the familiar combination, the tumblers clicking into place with a satisfying finality. He swung the heavy door open. Inside were not engine parts, but dozens of leather-bound journals filled with his elegant, precise handwriting and schematics. And on top of them, a single, thick binder labeled, Project Ultima. This was his unfinished symphony. The Veloce V12 had been a masterpiece of its time, but the Ultima was a generational leap forward. It was a naturally aspirated V12 designed to operate at an impossible 14,000 revolutions per minute, producing over 1,200 horsepower with a fraction of the weight. It used materials and engineering principles that were still purely theoretical to the rest of the industry. He had hidden it all away when Veloce was collapsing, unwilling to let it be consumed and corrupted by a corporate entity like Sterling. He ran a hand over the binder, a slow smile spreading across his face for the first time in a long time. They had sold him his own legacy for the price of a used car. They thought they had discarded a liability. In reality, they had handed him the keys to the future. 2 days later, the facility was no longer quiet. Elias made 3 phone calls. The first was to an old machinist named Ben, a man whose hands could feel a 10,000th of an inch. The second was to Maria, a master tuner who could map an engine's fuel and ignition timing by ear. The third was to a young fabrication expert named Carter, a protégé Elias had mentored at Veloce. All 3 had been unceremoniously laid off by Sterling, deemed too old school or too specialized for the new corporate structure. They were working odd jobs, their immense skills dormant. He did not offer them high salaries or corporate perks. He offered them something far more valuable. Ben, he had said, his voice calm and direct. I have our old shop. And I have the Ultima schematics. I need you. There was a pause on the other end of the line, then a gruff, emotional voice. When do I start? They arrived the next morning, their own professional-grade tools in tow. There were no handshakes or formal greetings, just knowing nods. They were a team reformed, a fellowship of artisans united by a shared purpose and a deep, abiding respect for their craft and for the men who had brought them back together. They were not there for the money. They were there for the work. The following weeks were a montage of methodical transformation. The first step was restoration. The team descended upon the dormant workshop, cleaning, calibrating, and coaxing the old machines back to life. The humming of the lathes, the hiss of the welders, the sharp clang of metal on metal, it was the sound of a resurrection. Elias moved through the chaos like a conductor, orchestrating the entire process with quiet directives and hands-on adjustments. He did not raise his voice, he did not need to. His presence was enough. They stripped down the prototype V12S, meticulously cleaning every part. Ben rehoned the cylinder walls with a proprietary technique Elias had taught him, his movements slow and deliberate. Maria rewired the old engine dynamometer, her brow furrowed in concentration. Carter began fabricating new components for the Ultima engine, his TIG welder leaving behind a signature stack of dimes bead that was a work of art in itself. There were setbacks. A crucial milling machine had a faulty controller board. A rare alloy needed for the Ultima's valve springs was no longer in production. But these were not obstacles, they were problems to be solved. Elias, using his old contacts, found a retired engineer in Germany who had 2 of the controller boards in his basement. He spent 3 days in the small lab at the back of the shop, reformulating the alloy himself, creating a new version that was even stronger than the original. He worked with a quiet, relentless intensity, often late into the night, long after the others had gone home. Lily would sometimes visit the shop after school, sitting on a stool and watching her father work. She saw the light back in his eyes, the passion he had suppressed for so long. "You're building something important, aren't you, Papa?" she asked one afternoon, watching him review a complex schematic. He looked up, his face smudged with grease, and smiled. "Yes, Lily," he said. "We are." After 2 months of ceaseless, focused labor, the first major milestone was reached. They had fully restored one of the original Veloce V12 prototypes. It sat on an engine stand in the center of the workshop, a gleaming sculpture of aluminum and steel. It was not just repaired, it was perfected. Every bolt was torqued to exact specifications, every surface polished, every tolerance checked and rechecked. It was better than new. The team gathered around as Elias connected the final fuel line. There was no ceremony, just a shared, palpable tension. He climbed into the reinforced cockpit of the dynamometer cell and hit the ignition. The engine turned over once, twice, then erupted into a sound that none of them had heard in years. It was not the brutish roar of a muscle car, it was a crisp, complex, high-pitched howl, the sound of pure, unadulterated performance. It settled into a perfect, stable idle, each of its 12 cylinders firing in flawless harmony. Maria watched the diagnostic screen, her eyes wide. "The numbers are perfect, Elias," she whispered. "Power, torque, emissions. They're even better than the original spec." Ben ran a hand over the valve cover, a rare smile on his weathered face. They had done it. They had brought the ghost back to life. While the team began work on the first full Ultima prototype, Marcus Vance made his move. He did not issue a press release or seek public validation. He made 2 phone calls. The first was to a reclusive Swiss industrialist named Henrik Larsson, a legendary collector of rare and significant automobiles. The second was to the technical director of Pagani Automobili, a company known for its fanatical attention to detail and its use of bespoke engines. A private demonstration was arranged at a discreet racetrack an hour outside the city. Larsson and the Pagani director arrived in a black helicopter, their expressions skeptical. They were men who had seen everything. Marcus and Elias met them. Elias wore his usual work clothes, a stark contrast to the visitor's expensive attire. He did not give a sales pitch. He simply led them to the garage where the restored V12 prototype was mounted in a test chassis. He started the engine. For 10 minutes, the only sound was the V12 soaring crescendo as Elias ran it through its paces. The visitors were silent, their skepticism melting into awe. Larsson, a man who owned Ferraris and Bugattis of historical significance, walked over to the engine after it was shut down. He examined the craftsmanship, the finish, the sheer perfection of it. "This is not a restoration," he said, his voice filled with reverence. "This is a resurrection. It is the work of an artist." He turned to Elias. "I will pay you $3 million for it." Today, before Elias could respond, the Pagani director stepped forward. "The engine is magnificent," he said, his Italian accent precise. "But we are more interested in the future. We hear rumors of a Project Ultima." Elias simply nodded toward another garage bay. He opened the door, revealing the first completed V1E2 Ultima engine, gleaming under a single spotlight. It was smaller, lighter, and more intricate than the Veloce engine. It was a jewel. The director spent an hour examining it, his team taking measurements and running scans. He looked at Elias, his professional composure barely masking his excitement. "We would like to commission a limited run of 24 Ultima engines for our next model, the Salus," he said. The contract would be worth $80 million. In a single afternoon, in a quiet garage far from the world of corporate finance, Elias Thorne's new company, now officially named Thorne Mechanics, had secured over $83 million in capital and contracts. The value of the scrap he had purchased for $10,000 had been validated in spectacular fashion. The news did not break in the financial press, but in a niche, ultra-exclusive automotive journal called The Apex, the cover story was a 10-page spread titled, "The Ghost of Veloce, Elias Thorne and the Return of the V12. It featured stunning photographs of the restored prototype and detailed technical drawings of the new Ultima engine, hailing it as the most significant advancement in internal combustion technology in a generation. The article referred to Elias Thorne not as a former employee of a defunct company, but as the reclusive master and the architect of the Veloce legend. Evelyn Reed was in a board meeting, discussing quarterly growth projections, when her assistant, David Chen, entered the room, his face pale. He broke protocol and placed a tablet in front of her, the Apex article open on the screen. "Madam CEO," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You need to see this." Evelyn waved him away, annoyed at the interruption. "Later, David." "Ma'am," David insisted, his voice firmer than she had ever heard it. "The article is about Thorn Mechanics. The founder is Elias Thorn." The name hung in the air. Evelyn's irritation turned to confusion. Thorn. The maintenance worker. She picked up the tablet. She read the headline. She saw the pictures of the engine, an engine she recognized from her own car. She read the part about the restored prototype selling for $3 million. She read about the $80 million contract with Pagani. Her mind, so adept at calculating profit and loss, began to spin. She scrolled through the article, her composure cracking with every sentence. She saw the mention of the long-lost prototypes, and original tooling recovered from a defunct Sterling-owned facility. The numbers flashed in her head: $10,000 paid, $83 million earned. The scale of the misjudgment was so vast, so catastrophic, it was almost incomprehensible. The blood drained from her face. The entire boardroom was silent, watching her. She had built her career on seeing value where others did not. And here, in plain sight, had been the single greatest asset her company had ever possessed, and she had not only failed to see it, she had personally, arrogantly, thrown it away. The fallout within Sterling was swift and brutal. Evelyn needed a scapegoat. She called Gerald Finch into her office. The sycophantic vice president, who had laughed about the junk collector, entered with his usual ingratiating smile. It vanished when he saw the look on Evelyn's face. She didn't yell. Her voice was a blade of ice. "Explain to me," she said, sliding the tablet across her desk, "how you valued the single most important piece of automotive engineering intellectual property of the last 20 years as scrap metal." Gerald stammered, his face turning ashen as he read the article. The inventory reports. It was listed as obsolete. I had no idea." "Your job is to have an idea." Evelyn's voice finally rose, cracking like a whip. "Your job is to know the assets you manage. You signed off on the sale. You celebrated it." She stood up, her hands flat on her desk. "You are a liability, Gerald. Clean out your desk." He was escorted out by security, a sacrificial lamb to her monumental error. But Evelyn knew it was not enough. The board was watching. The market would soon know. The value of the Lamborghini Fenice, her personal symbol of power, was now inextricably tied to the men she had fired. Without his validation, his service, his history, the cars were just beautiful machines with an orphaned engine. Their provenance, and thus a huge part of their value, now belonged to Thorn Mechanics. A week later, Evelyn Reed drove the Fenice herself. She did not take her usual entourage. She drove it out of the city, into the industrial district she so disdained. She followed the GPS to a clean but unremarkable building, a stark contrast to the gleaming towers of her world. Over the main bay door was a new, simple sign, laser-cut from brushed stainless steel: Thorn Mechanics. She parked the silver hypercar next to a modest pickup truck. The juxtaposition was jarring. She stepped out, her expensive heels clicking on the clean-swept concrete. The main door was open. Inside, the workshop was a hive of quiet, focused activity. She saw Elias standing by a workbench, talking quietly with an older man in greasy overalls. He was not wearing a suit or a lab coat. He was in his usual flannel shirt and work pants, a grease smudge on his cheek. He looked up as she approached, his expression neutral. He was not surprised to see her. The power dynamic had been irrevocably reversed. She was on his turf now, a supplicant, whether she admitted it or not. "Mr. Thorn," she began, her voice tight with forced composure. "I am Evelyn Reed. I know who you are," he said, his voice calm. He did not offer his hand. "Your recent success has come to my attention," she said, struggling to find the right words. "The Ultima engine is a remarkable achievement. Sterling Automotive Group would be interested in discussing a partnership. An acquisition, perhaps. We are prepared to make a very generous offer to bring Thorn Mechanics under the Sterling umbrella." Elias listened, his face betraying no emotion. He wiped his hands on a clean rag, his movements deliberate. "We're not for sale," he said simply. The words, delivered without anger or arrogance, were a brick wall. Evelyn was taken aback. She was used to people crumbling before the weight of her offers. Perhaps a strategic alliance, then, she pressed. A supply contract. We could misread, Elias interrupted, his voice still quiet but now carrying an edge of finality. You didn't see any value in my work when you owned it. You saw it as trash. Why should I believe you see any value in it now? You don't see an engine. You see a commodity. You see a problem that you need to solve to protect your stock price. He gestured around the workshop. We don't build commodities here. We build engines. There's a difference. Her corporate armor, so effective in the boardroom, was useless here. She was out of her element, stripped of her usual leverage. Desperation began to creep into her voice. The Fenice, she said, gesturing toward her car. The Veloce V12s. There are 20 of them. They will need service. They will need parts. You are the only one who can do it properly. The owners. They will only trust you. It was a plea disguised as a business proposition. He had her, and they both knew it. Elias considered this for a moment. He looked past her, at the silver car gleaming in the doorway. He thought of the engine inside, his engine. It deserved to be cared for. He was a builder, but he was also a steward. All right, he said. Thorn Mechanics will offer a service and certification program for the 20 original Veloce V12 engines. He named a price for the initial certification of a single car. The number was astronomical, more than the annual salary of a senior executive. He then named the price for the annual service contract. It was equally breathtaking. Those are our terms, he said. They are not negotiable. Evelyn stared at him, speechless. The price was punitive, an undisguised tax on her arrogance. But she had no choice. To maintain the value and prestige of her own car, and those of the other 19 powerful owners who would soon be calling her, she had to agree. It was the most humbling deal she had ever made. Agreed, she said, the word tasting like defeat. The new sign was the only outward indication of the immense success contained within the walls of Thorn Mechanics. It was understated, elegant, and permanent. The business thrived, not through aggressive marketing, but through the quiet, gravitational pull of unparalleled excellence. Orders for the Ultima engine came from the most exclusive corners of the automotive world. The workshop expanded, but the core team remained the same small, loyal group of artisans. Elias ensured the culture never changed. It was always about the work. He was now a wealthy man, but his life remained simple. He bought a larger house, but one with a bigger garage and a yard for Lily to play in, not one in a gated community. He still drove his pickup truck. His real wealth was not in his bank account, it was in his freedom, in the respect of his peers, and in the time he now had with his daughter. One Saturday, he was in the garage at home, standing over a small, disassembled engine on his workbench. Lily, now a little older, stood on a stool beside him, watching intently. He was showing her how to measure the gap on a spark plug. It has to be just right, he explained, his voice patient. Not too wide, not too narrow. The spark needs to be strong, but not wasteful. It's about balance, Lily. It's always about balance, she nodded, her serious expression a perfect echo of his. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the tools of his trade, with his daughter by his side, Elias Thorn was complete. He had not sought revenge, but he had achieved a far more satisfying vindication. He had proven that true value is not found on a spreadsheet or in a brand name, but in the quiet, methodical, and passionate application of skill. He had not become the thing he defeated. He had simply, quietly, built a better world for himself on his own terms. Across town, Evelyn Reed sat in her cold, minimalist office, staring at an invoice on her desk. It was from Thorn Mechanics, for the first annual service of her Lamborghini Fenice. The amount was galling, a constant, painful reminder of her greatest failure. The car, once a symbol of her power and foresight, now felt like a monument to her own hubris. She had learned the hardest lesson of her career, that some things, and some people, cannot be quantified. The most valuable assets are often the ones that do not appear on a balance sheet at all. They are hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone with the wisdom to see past the surface and recognize the substance within. The engine of her car ran perfectly, a testament to the genius of the men she had discarded. It was a smooth, powerful, and constant reminder of the quiet master she had underestimated, and the priceless legacy she had mistaken for junk. The world was not just assets and liabilities. It was also skill, passion, and integrity. And those, she now understood, were things you could not acquire or liquidate. They had to be earned.